Let's talk about Abomination piloting. So on pull, you're going to run up and interact with the bench. Make sure that nobody dispels you after you become an Abomination. Your character can be dispelled, and if that happens, you lose control of the A-bomb, and you'll likely fall too far behind. On normal, the priority is just suck up all the ooze in the room all the time, and when there's no ooze, you're just DPSing the boss. If the boss is positioned close enough to the ooze, you can do both. You can see me slamming 1 and 3 here until the boss goes out of range, at which point I'm just slamming 1. 1 allows you to suck up the goo, 3 is your kind of DPS ability. Then when the ad spawns, you're going to use the slow, which is number 2. 2 requires you to have 45 energy to use it, so that's why you need to suck up the goo in the room, and you just repeat this the entire fight. Now, make sure you're sucking the goo up in the room right away. If you delay it too long, you can end up in a situation where you have multiple massive goo puddles, and you just can't suck up the goo quickly enough to beat the expanding rate of the pools when there are multiple of them. Now, on Heroic, it's a bit of a different story. So in this pool, there are 2 sets of slime pools that go out before the boss transitions into the next phase. I've immediately sucked up the first set of slime pools, and I'm currently working on the second set. But by the time we phase the boss, I don't have enough slime to slow both ads right away. And this is a problem, right? The phase intermissions on Professor Putricide are some of the most difficult parts of the encounter, and it's very important that you slow both of the ads during this phase transition. And to accomplish this, there's actually quite a few different ways you can go about it. Now, I'm assuming that you're phasing the boss roughly a minute into the encounter before the orange ad spawns. You can still do this fight with the orange ad spawning, pushing into the first phase transition after it goes down. But doing so means you end up with an extra Unbound Plague, and most raid guilds at this point in time will have enough gear and damage to beat the orange ad. So we're assuming that you're phasing the boss roughly a minute into the encounter. This means you'll get 4 slime pools before you phase the boss. These 4 slime pools are important. Remember that they exist. So the first strategy, and the most simple one, involves you skipping the slow on the first ad to guarantee you have enough energy to immediately slow both ads during the intermission. So with this strat, you prioritize clearing the room of slime at all times. This way you'll have 100 energy going into the first phase transition, and you can immediately slow both of the ads and DPS 1 ad full time. This strategy is good because it's simple. Prioritize first clearing the room of slime, and then doing damage to whatever is in the room, whether it be the boss or the ads. Additionally, it means that the room is always clear of slime, so the raid doesn't need to worry too much about positioning themselves in specific areas or being limited to where they can go around the boss's room. The downside to this strat is, for one, you're not slowing the first ad, which may mean it ends up doing an extra set of knockbacks before you're able to kill it. Another downside is that you're not able to kind of re-slow one of the ads during the phase transition. The slows themselves last 20 seconds, but oftentimes both the ads won't die in that 20-second window, especially early on in progression when, again, you don't have as much gear, maybe you're a little bit less familiar with the encounter. Because most raid guilds will choose to have their Abomination prioritize one ad down before the other, oftentimes it's the green one, the orange ad will generally fixate on a target for a period of time, the slow will wear off, and then it will fixate on a new target. It is necessary that this new target has either movement baked into their class or has boots available to get away from the orange ad, because you won't have the energy to slow it for a second time since there's no ooze in the room for you to draw from. So now we move on to option 2. For option 2, what we're going to do is we're not going to immediately suck up the slime in the room. So recall that Professor Putricide sends out 2 sets of slime pools 2 times before he phases into the first intermission, right? Assuming we're beating the orange ad spawn. So we're going to immediately suck up one of these slime pools and then slow roll the other. Okay, but what does it mean to slow roll? So we know that these slime pools will expand and grow if left untouched. With this strategy, we want this to happen. The idea here is that if you let a slime pool grow, it will expand and have more potential slime, thus there being more potential energy for you to draw from, allowing you to get to higher energy stacks than you would otherwise had you just immediately sucked up that slime pool. But it comes with the condition that you have to let it sit and grow. Meaning, you now have 2 options with this strategy. You can either slow the first ad and then slow both ads during the first phase transition. This can be a little tricky when you only slow roll one slime pool. Depending on how you play it, if you slow the first ad, you may not have enough energy to slow both ads during the phase transition, at least right away. I show a good example of that in this clip here. So that's one thing you can do with slow rolling. Another thing you can do is skip the slow on the first ad, as you did in option 1, but this time we're going to immediately slow the ads on the transition, as we've done before, but slow roll the second set of slime pools, such that after we send out the initial slow, we can draw from that slime pool to then gain enough energy to re-slow an ad during the phase transition. So the upside to this strategy is that there are more slows going out, which means you can have better control on the ads, either by slowing the first ad and reducing the total amount of knockbacks it may otherwise do, or by re-slowing an ad during the phase transition, enabling your raid to get away from it without needing movement abilities or rocket boots. Then the downside of this strategy is that you need to intentionally leave a slime pool somewhere in the room, so that becomes somewhere that your raid now can no longer work with, right? You can't have people standing in the slime, it does damage to them. So your raid team will need to navigate around the slime pool. Often when you play for this strategy, you try to bait the slime pools in a favorable position where it isn't going to compromise the rest of your raid team, right? So maybe you bait it against the wall or something. Another con is that your A-bomb is going to spend less time doing effective damage to something. By slow rolling these slime pool sets, you spend more time collecting the goo than you do actually hitting either the boss or the ads when they spawn. Now, the slow itself does do damage, and with this strategy, since we're sending another slow out, that's effectively, more damage, but comparatively, the dot left by the slow does less damage than your melees would otherwise do. And looking specifically at the phase transition, right, let's say you choose to slow roll the second set of slime pools and re-slow an ad for a second time during the phase transition. That's time that you're spending during the phase transition not attacking one of the ads to instead suck up goo and re-slow an ad. The phase transitions are kind of a DPS check, so this can be meaningful damage that you're not doing. And the final con is that this strategy is more complicated than the previous one, specifically when it comes to slow rolling the slime pools. If you misplay the slime pools, maybe you suck it up too early, and all of a sudden you don't have enough energy to slow both of the ads on the transition. Or you don't have enough energy to slow an ad for a second time during the phase transition. Conversely, maybe you play too greedy, and the pools grow too large to the point where you have enough energy to send out your necessary slows, but you're not able to clear the slime pools in time before new sets of slime pools come out, and you end up falling behind. With this sort of balancing act in mind, we move on to the final strategy of slowing literally everything. You're slowing both the first ad that spawns, you're slowing both ads on the phase transition, and you're re-slowing an ad for a second time after the first set of slows wears off. Now, a great example of this, and footage I want to reference, comes from Progress's world first run of ICC, where their Abomination pilot does exactly this. This strategy is by far the most difficult because you have to slow roll both sets of slime that Professor Putricide throws out. So there's the highest likelihood of the A-bomb pilot making a mistake and being too greedy where they fall behind and they're not able to clear the slime pools. Or on the other hand, they don't let the slime pools grow enough, such that by the time they clear them, the slime pools are too small and they don't have the energy necessary to get all the slows out right away. The obvious upside to this strategy is that you have the most control over the ads. You're slowing all of them, your raid has ample time to react and make decisions based on what ad's doing what, where it is, and where they need to put their damage. The downside is that it is by far the most complicated and most difficult strategy to pull off as an Abomination pilot, and it means that there will be multiple pools of slime in the room that your raid has to navigate around and avoid. Now, in order for this strategy to be successful, you have to proceed in the following. At 10 seconds into the fight, Professor Putricide will drop the first set of slime pools. The idea here is you want to immediately start working on one of those slime pools and drawing energy from it, but be sure not to completely clear it. Before you clear it, you're going to jump to the other, larger slime pool and then start drawing from that one. giving the former slime pool, which is now smaller since you've already drawn from it, a chance to grow and expand in size. This gives you more potential energy to draw from and enables you to get all the slows off necessary that you need to do this strategy. Now at around 40 to 45 seconds into the fight, you want to begin working on clearing this first set of slime pools. This is because a new set of slime pools will be spawning, and you can then use those slime pools to generate the remaining energy you need to slow both ads during the intermission and to re-slow an ad for a second time. Now you don't necessarily need to do it in this exact order. For example, maybe you choose to leave the first set of slimes, but then clear the second set, right? And then the first set of slimes are the ones you draw from going into the intermission. The important thing here for the strategy to work is that you must slow roll the first set of slime pools. Then, by the time the second set of slime pools spawns, you must clear one of the existing sets. Now, note I'm using the word sets here because they spawn in pairs of 2. This is the only way you will have enough energy to get 4 slows off within about a minute and 30 seconds into the fight. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, Shindig, you can just not suck up any of the slime pool sets, right? You can go into the phase transition with 4 pools active. And that way you will effectively have enough energy to draw from, but the problem here is that is a lot of boss room space that your raid can now no longer work with because it's covered with slime. Additionally, at 4 slime pools, you're likely going to fall too far behind, and the slime pools will grow too large to the point that you will no longer be able to clear them. So probably avoid doing that unless you want the room to look like this. Now with all this potential variation at the start of the fight, once you actually get into phase 2, the rest of the fight proceeds pretty much the same regardless of which strategy you used. Professor Putricide will continue dropping slime pools every 35 to 40 seconds or so. If you immediately draw from those pools and use them to slow an ad, you will end up energy positive, meaning you'll have slightly more energy after clearing those pools and slowing an ad than you did before that process. Now, the amount of energy you will have more is pretty small. So depending on how quickly you're clearing this encounter, so how quickly you're pushing the boss into the second phase transition, you may need to slow roll 1 or multiple pools, but at this point in the fight, it's a lot easier to do so because you're no longer under the same time crunch as you were at the start of the fight. Finally, looking towards the second phase transition, you're left with 2 possibilities for ways you can proceed. In both options here, it's important to enter the second phase transition with 100 energy, and to end the transition with no slime pools currently up. This way, you give your raid the most possible space to work with in phase 3. Now the variation here comes from how you choose to handle slime pools during the phase transition. In option 1, you're going to immediately slow both of the ads and clear all the slime pools in the room. This way, you ensure there will be no slime going into phase 3. The downside is that you have no way to re-slow any of the ads for a second time. Note that during the second phase transition, you have about 30 seconds left in the Abomination before you get booted out. This strategy is good if you're able to kill both of the oozes off before the slows wear out. The Abomination can help with this because once they slow both of the ads, they can just have full uptime for the remainder of those 30 seconds. For the second option, you're again going to head into the phase transition with 100 energy, but this time you're leaving a slime pool or multiple somewhere in the room. The idea here is you want to immediately slow both ads and then draw from those slime pools and eventually clear them so that you can then re-slow one of the ads for a second time. This option allows your raid to better control the ads, but it comes with the risk that if you don't completely clear the slime pool, that's less space that you have in the room to then work with during phase 3. As an Abomination pilot, if you're able to pull this off consistently and correctly, the strategy can be good for raid teams that have slightly less damage and aren't able to kill off their ads before the first set of slows wears off. But be wary of the risk if you're not able to clear out the slime before getting kicked out of the Abomination. This is generally not worth it. And that about sums things up. If you enjoyed or found this content helpful, be sure to like and subscribe. I'd love to keep making videos like this, and doing a small thing like that can go a long way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.